Okay, so we are on, what is it, what number? 321? 321. I'm not going to skip 321. I sort of came to a conclusion or an understanding yesterday when I missed a lesson that I would do them exactly as I went through them the first time. So if I miss a lesson or a day, there's no judgment about it. I just pick up at that lesson right after the day that I missed. So while most people may be working on, excuse me, 322, I'm on creation. What is creation? And lesson number 321. Because what I realize is this: when we get to the end of the workbook, the last set of lessons, we just utilize the same lesson over and over again, much as Jesus is saying now, in that we just use these words as a way of introducing the time that we will allow ourselves to go beyond them and experience what we join with the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit finds us ready to experience. What is creation? There's no way a mind, I don't know, let me see if I could say this. There is no way a mind locked in concepts. I think I'm just remembering now a line from the Course where Jesus talks about anyone who makes his way, and this is a paraphrase, if you spend time making your way through it, trying to pick your way through time in order to achieve something within space and time, and he uses adjectives there to talk about the state of mind you would experience, and I think misery is in there. But anyone who is identified with that and is locked into that action of mind has no way of understanding what creation is, because it'll always look to the concepts that it's already holding of what creation is. Hold them up to the concepts that it thinks it sees within what we're reading, and then due to the nature of the evaluative or egoic mind, it will just compare and contrast what it thinks it already knows, never being willing to go beyond what it knows, in fear that something will be found that is worse than what's already occurring. And I assure you that when your mind is restored to the recognition of who you are in creation, and you experience that. Now, I'm going to say this. You cannot hold on to that experience within space and time, and yet you cannot lose the light and understanding that you receive and are blessed with by the grace of God when you do have that experience. It becomes living information. It becomes living information, and if you're like me, it becomes a living motivation to seek only the kingdom of heaven, in spite of the fact that we seem to be still existing in the world of space and time. I had this realization yesterday about myself, and I do want to say this. I find, and I do find evidence within A Course in Miracles, there's a difference between a realization about oneself and a revelation of God, the revelation that's brought to us under the auspices of the Holy Spirit, because we've been revelation readied through forgiveness. A realization about oneself is not the same as, oh, I had a revelation. That doesn't mean you now know something more. Revelation is when your mind and heart are free enough of guilt and sin, are free enough of fear of the Father. And I'm going to tell you the way it happened for me. There's a saying in the 12-step program, and I want to see about getting it right. When the fear of not doing it is greater than the fear of doing it. I think that's the way it is, or it could possibly be reversed. But when you're surrounded by fear and you no longer have a choice, and it seems where every decision you make is represented, every decision you make is associated with some sort of fear in your own mind. It is at that point where you can either cry out for help in an honest moment and all power and creation will be restored to you because you have no place left to go in your mind. And you're unwilling to go back into the thinking that caused you to get yourself into the state of mind where you had to cry out for help because on all sides of you, you were surrounded by a problem that you could not solve, nor were the consequences of anything you were thinking as a result of the problem acceptable to you. When you only want one thing, God's will, you cry out honestly. And what's the word he uses for that? Unequivocal. Okay. So in a moment when there was no place left for me to go in my own mind, and Jesus met me, because that was the sign that he was welcome. I don't know if I could teach this. It's sort of a backwards way of looking at it. You signal your readiness and willingness by doing something, by a way of using your mind that signals the self of you, the Holy Spirit of you, that you are not ready. So it's not like you're just going to go about thinking the way you've been thinking and hope that the Holy Spirit is going to enter into your mind. It's not that way. What it is you're thinking the way you're thinking. And all of a sudden you get to a point where you no longer want the result of your own thinking. And you actually make an active decision to not want it. And not fill that space with some sort of idea of what you want within separation as a solution. It is then when something could happen, and one of the things that's entirely possible to happen if you are, in a sense, no longer willing to rely on the limitations of solutions that you've allowed yourself to come up with or think possible within the world. When you're no longer willing to settle for a worldly solution, and you demonstrate it by not going there in your mind, leaving that space blank an instant. It only takes that instant. Creation is the sum of all God's thoughts, in number infinite, and they are infinite in themselves. In number, they are infinite, because God could not create a finite number. He could no longer create one in the sense that we count one, as he could create 10 billion in the sense that we would be able to count 10 billion, because his creation is infinite. And each number, each one of us who are numbered in creation is equally infinite and everywhere without all limit. How do you like that? Think of the condition, and we're going to get into freedom when we talk about the lesson though. Think of what the human being's idea of freedom is. Okay, that's not what freedom is. freedom is founded in your creation. It can't be experienced by the finite mind, because the finite mind is the block to the ability to be aware of what you are as free in reality. Okay? When you experience who you are as free in reality, you will recognize that your reality could never have been here, because that freedom does not exist within a continuum that was manufactured based on an era of thinking that you were limited, when in fact you were unlimited, infinite, whole, and perfect. Okay? Only love creates. Okay, if you've been doing these lessons and having the experiences that are in line with the doing of the lessons and are brought to you, what's it say? In an individualized way, to help you personally in that sense, to help you who thinks they are a person defined by his personality. The lessons that are brought to you to show you that none of that is true. You are not, in a sense, a person or a personality in space-time. Although, when you begin to have these experiences of who you are in reality, the joy of who you are remembering, you are and will always be, will begin to, in a sense, inform or be embodied by the space and time seemingly material physicality that makes up your world. And I'm talking about your world. I'm not just talking about who you are seemingly as a human being. As you begin to come into the understanding of who you are, you'll be able to recognize the extension of who you are to include the space and time that you are allowed to exist in as that, because you will not experience yourself in the same way. Space and time is not a barrier to the extension of who you are in reality. It is not a barrier to you extending love. Space and time may be a barrier to a brother who is still locked in his own concepts. But that does not mean that it's a barrier to you, who have been freed from the necessity to know yourself as a self-concept and have accepted yourself as the creation that God created you to be. When you free yourself and have an experience of who you are in creation, the idea only love creates and only like itself will bring joy to your heart and laughter to your face, because you'll understand in the experience of what love is as the totality of your reality, the inability for there to have ever been anything else that could create, and especially any idea that is in opposition to creation, which would be what space and time is, because it would be laughable in the light of the recognition of what you are in creation, to think that space and time even has any meaning or value, except as the place that you've come to learn of your reality and give up the need for the classroom. Nor will there be a time when anything it created suffered, and there will never be a time, because time does not exist. There's a time in your mind when you think that this is occurring, and the way we relieve ourselves of that thinking is through the utilization of forgiveness and the fulfillment of our function as miracle workers to speed the end, the last judgment, so we could return to creation. Creation is the opposite of all illusion, for creation is the truth. Creation is the Holy Son of God, and it's going to go on to say the Holy Son of God is you. For in creation is his will complete. Yes, you can begin to experience the completion of who you are. You can begin to experience your will as being complete and whole in incidents when you free yourself of the thinking that this is true. You forgive yourself and allow light to come in. Okay? Now, the light will change you and change your relationship to the world and everything in it. And you will begin to live differently. You'll begin to live from the recognition of your light reality rather than based as a human being who's afraid to die. I remember I had this, I'm trying to put it into words. The other day, when I was at the workshop, I noticed something that I had never noticed, and it was a profound change in recognition. What I noticed is I no longer actually fear the world. The world is not my concern in that regard. What is my concern, as long as I am here sort of utilizing this body and identity within the world of space and time, because I have come for the salvation of the world, what I have realized is that my concern, since that moment when I recognized my, let's call it, birthing in creation as eternal and infinite, when Jesus made the promises to me that I need not do this again and I experienced salvation, my concern has really only been one thing and one thing only. How do I fulfill my function? How do I allow the learning that I have been glimpsing in the moments when I am beyond space and time? How do I allow that learning into my life so as to embody it to enough and be willing enough to fulfill my function and not have to utilize this any longer? That's been my concern. I'm not concerned with death because I recognize I cannot die. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not concerned with what it's going to look like. It is going to be a surprise to me how it occurs, though. It's like Jesus gave me a message to give to a friend of mine today. I gave him a case of sparkly editions. Now, one thing Jesus has assured me since the beginning of my tenure and stewardship with the sparkly edition is that he is in charge of space and time, and these books will get into the hands that he wants them to get into. So they said to me, thanks for the books, blah, blah, blah. We've already determined some of those who are getting, but the rest are yet to be determined. So I sort of read it and laughed, and then Jesus gave me a message to give me, no, all things have already been determined. Our job now is just to sit back and allow things to unfold so as to be a surprise, so as to recognize the surprises that are in store. But when he used the word store, it wasn't store, it was, he was showing me the surprises were already in our storehouse. That's why some place is going to be, I choose the second place, the first. We step back and let him lead the way. I can go on forever with this. All I know is you are what creation is, and you can't understand it by attempting to put bits and pieces of understanding together. You're never going to find out what creation is by studying evolution. You're never going to find out what creation is by studying archaeology. You're never going to find out what creation is by studying cosmology. You're going to find out what creation is when you're sick and tired of your own ideas and everyone else's. Give up because you don't know, but God does, and that's all you want to know now. Okay? Our Father's voice calls to us. That is our Father. That is the call to our Father's voice. The Holy Spirit is always recognized as the answer. Okay, God gave us the answer in the Holy Spirit that we would have so that he would be with us here in the dream of space and time. Okay, but as long as we still think there is a problem, then the answer is always going to be found in God, because God is everything true, real, whole, and perfect. Now that's what you are as well. But since you have not been able to find the answer within yourself, you've been trying to find the answer for yourself and not for the totality of what yourself is in reality, and that's where the problem is. My freedom is in you alone, Father, because you've created me with free will. Free will does not mean what the ego would like to translate it into or interpret it to be. Free will is entirely different. It is the nature of who we are. Free will, it means our will is unlimited, unfettered, and unbound. It cannot be limited by concepts at all. Cannot be limited by definitions, although we could use the unlimited and infinite power of it to define and conceptualize, thereby necessitating ourselves getting the result of it. And here you are in the world that is that. Now free yourself from the need to do that and all you've done to get yourself to that point, and you'll come to know a creation as instantaneously. You'll never be the same. You'll never have the same desires. You'll experience the same desires, but you'll experience it in an entirely different way. You experience your desires simply because every desire is going to be an impulse towards sharing. Every desire is going to be an impulse for some sort of miraculous joining, because there's no such thing as loss and need. There's only such thing as losing the identity of something that has loss or can lose. Okay, Father, my freedom is in you alone. Today we answer for the world, which will be free along with us. Okay, this is what I'm going to say, and this is what I know for sure. When I experience who I am in creation, I absolutely knew. When Jesus said to me, you know, you're doing this yourself, that key went into that lock and unlocked everything for me. I knew that the answer and the experience I have is the answer that everyone's looking for, because it was universal in its application and experience, and I recognize that everyone is me, and everyone does get to that point, did get to that point, and does have the experience, so this is not necessary anymore. That's what salvation is. This is sort of exciting. And how sure is all the world's salvation when we learn our freedom can be found in God alone and stop looking for it anywhere else, and stop blaming anything for the loss of it.